Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Rick Doten. He is a former VP Information Security and Health Plan CISO at Centene. He's also a startup advisor and AI governance and ethics researcher. Welcome, Rick.
Hello, good to be here.
Thanks for being here. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career thus far?
Oh, yeah. Wow. I've pretty much done every role, since like the early 90s in cybersecurity, and have been a CISO, have been a virtual CISO, have run ethical hacking teams, run incident response and forensics teams. So pretty much done a little bit of everything in big companies, little companies, multinational companies, small private companies. So pretty much the gamut.
Very cool. So you've seen a lot of corners of the industry. I guess broadly, do you think the talent gap is real? And if so, what would you say it looks like?
No, I don't think it's real. I think there's plenty of people who can do the job. We are looking in the wrong places and we're asking for the wrong things.
Yeah. So what are those wrong places that we're looking in, and what would be the right places, I guess?
So I'm biased particularly in cybersecurity and particularly, technical things. I I managed ethical hackers. I'm hiring incident responders. I'm hiring security operations folks. And a lot of it's based on personality. And 25 years ago, if I'm hiring an ethical hacker, I don't expect them to have done the work. I just want to understand that they are multi-threaded. They fail quickly. They figure things out as they go along. They'll run forward with little information and they'll just kind of go. And that's much more important than whether you have a degree or a certification or you worked in a certain industry or did a certain thing, because I can train you on the technical aspects of it, but I can't train you on how to think. And so we are always asking, the fallacy is that we're asking for certain types of non-tangible things in somebody's background, but not how they think and how they work. And that is a lot less, it's because it doesn't scale, right? It's really easy to say, oh, I'm looking for someone with a degree in this, a certification in this, and experience in that. And then I can weed down 500 people down to like 7 that have it and then talk to those 7 instead of looking at the resumes and saying, who is this person? How do they think? And trying to, based on other kind of factors, enumerate that information about them. And so I don't fault it, because it's how do we make this scalable and repeatable? But we're also missing out people who may be in other industries, maybe in other disciplines. It could be in accounting, could be in audit, could be art majors, whatever. But we're discounting them because they don't have the 5 keywords that we're looking for.
Yeah, well, and I can tell you from a recruiter's perspective, we have to have something to search for. We can't search for intangible traits. That's not something that shows up on a resume or a LinkedIn profile. So how do we square that circle if we're hiring for intangible traits, but that's not something we can see on paper? Like, where do we start, I guess? Like, we have to start somewhere. So if we start with technical skills because that's something we can view on paper.
Sure.
How do we do that?
So how I would always tell the HR is like, it would start with the important thing is my job description. And I'm describing not just the trite things that we're like, oh, you're security operations, you're going to be using these tools, you'll be looking for this, these are the tasks you're going to do, and this is what's expected of you, this kind of thing. It was like, I'm asking for things about, being able to use fluid reasoning. Are you good at troubleshooting? Are you good at approaching problems that you may not have ever seen before? How do you feel about approaching a problem that has never been solved before? How do you feel about dealing with uncertainty in your day-to-day, or do you want certainty in that? Those kinds of things. And then what I say is, anyone who is what I tell HR is, anyone who reads that and wants to do that, I want to look at their resume. And so again, I'm biased and it's not perfect. And I know you have your job that you need to do, and our internal talent acquisition have their job they need to do. But, if I'm trying to find the best people and not like let people fall through the cracks because they don't have the right little numbers or the AI model they use to match my thing exactly, because that was the other challenge, right? Is with Gen AI, I would have, everybody's resume was perfect, because they know how to tailor it to match what the job description is. And then they get past the great firewall of HR and we talk to them as like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And so how do we reconcile that? And then, I'll talk later about some ways to do that. But to finish answering your question, it is by having a job description that's not just asking for technical things. And when someone is saying, looked at that and they say, oh, wow, I'm good at that, then they send it, and then I look at it and I'm like, wow, you don't have experience in this, but I see that you were, a bartender and you were used to handling, a lot of things at once, and you can, dealing with uncertainty and when something goes wrong, and that you were, you are of a special interest in this other thing. And this stuff is like, let me talk to you because I could probably train you into that than someone who has gone through by the book, taken classes, got a degree and everything. And I know I'm like angering everybody who's listening to me right now. And again, that's my bias and how I would want how I'd want a perfect world. But this is how we get to those people who are not the ones that we are, that we're completely missing, that are perfectly capable of doing the job and that have been intimidated about moving into cybersecurity and have, because they say, oh, well, I'm not good at math or these other things. That's how we do it.
Well, and it seems like you would then need to instruct the recruiters to look for, whether they're internal or external, to look for patterns versus a standard set of boxes to check. So, for instance, somebody's looking for somebody with job stability. They would be looking for somebody that didn't demonstrate that they were hopping jobs every 6 months or so. If you're looking for somebody that's adaptable, maybe you look for somebody who's changed industries a few times. I'm just trying to think of
those are good.
How you could instruct the recruiters what to look for when a lot of what you're looking for is intangible and not necessarily on the page.
And that's a very good point. And yes, and this comes back to my first statement is I understand, particularly in large companies, we need to make it scalable and repeatable because you have 10 other, managers, directors, VPs are asking for things and you're getting thousands of resumes and you can't just go special do this stuff. I understand. I'm talking perfection of what I would love to have. And in mid-sized companies, maybe you can do that. But, how can we steer towards that? So, but getting back to your question is about sitting and talking with them and explaining this concept. Like, listen, I'm not looking for keywords. I'm looking for personality types. And the job hopping thing, that was a really interesting one because in my pattern matching mind, I'm thinking, is there a reason they're job hopping? Because that might be some benefit because they get to a point where then they get bored and they want to do something else. And I'm like, all right, great. Well, I'm going to keep them engaged and enriched and working on something and challenged all the time. And they're going to stick around. So why are they leaving? Would be something that I would kind of dig into in that sense. But when, yes, it's in describing to talent acquisition what kind of traits I'm looking for and what kind of people that would have that and what kind of personalities would have that. And maybe some certain questions. I'm writing an article right now about AI prompt engineering. And I don't know if you or anybody else had the peanut butter and jelly prompt when you were in elementary school or high school, where it was a writing thing. My sons back in the early 2000s when they were in elementary school, and they say, describe how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in as much detail as possible. And you're going to take your paper out to the hallway where one of the volunteer mothers is going to have a jar of peanut butter and jelly and a loaf of bread. And she's going to read the instructions and going to follow it exactly without any context. And so when it says, okay, put the peanut butter on the bread, it's like, okay, I'll take the jar of peanut butter and I put it on the loaf of bread, right? So that's AI. You can see how it relates to AI prompt engineering. You need context, right? And so I was talking to one of my friends locally. We were at dinner and we were talking about neurodiversity, which I'll talk about in a little bit, which a lot of people in cybersecurity are neurodiverse. And so that helps us in these patterns of matching and these thinking and these fluid reasoning things that makes us able to do this stuff. And he says, I always ask the peanut butter and jelly the peanut butter and jelly prompt and say, describe to me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and see how detailed they are. And say, okay, I would open the jar of peanut butter. I would take a knife. I would take out about a tablespoon of peanut butter. I would open up the loaf of bread. I would reach in past the heel of the bread and pull two pieces out. I would lay it on flat and I'd put it on one half of the bread on this edge to edge and just how they describe it to you and what level of detail do they go into in describing it. So things like that kind of help, and I'd mentioned before that sometimes there's pre-interview questions. Some big companies don't like that, but saying, all right, how would you answer some of these questions? Well, like that. It may not be specifically about the thing, but just how you think, and kind of see how they respond to it. And if they're resistant to answering the questions, like, this has nothing to do with the job. Why am I asking this question about how to make a stupid peanut butter jelly? Then you just answer the question and you're not for me.
Yep. Well, certainly there are a lot of different ways to evaluate whether somebody's a fit for your team. And I think a lot of hiring managers may think about it from their perspective and what I'm going to ask in an interview, but often they don't educate the recruiters.
Right.
Hey, here's what you need to be asking on the front end to make sure I'm not wasting my time with folks that aren't a fit. So it's like I always say, if you spend a little bit of time with your recruiting team, internal or external, on the front end, end up saving hours and hours and hours of your time.
Absolutely agree with that. It's important, and that goes back to prompt engineering, giving you the context. If I just say make a peanut butter and jelly, and you're from Europe, you're like, what the hell is a peanut butter and jelly? It's just like an Australian telling you, like, make me a Vegemite sandwich. What's Vegemite? What's a Vegemite sandwich? If we don't have the context, how are we supposed to know how to do it?
Yeah, well, and giving people the why behind the questions.
Yeah,
that context.
Yeah, absolutely is why, because it is a discipline that's different than, and I'm sure my friends in accounting and in HR and in contracts and in legal and all this stuff may have differing opinions, but my static analysis, purely anecdotally, is like, there are certain things like, okay, do you have a CP or you have a CPA? Are you, have you passed law school? Or there are certain, like, are you high enough to ride? For me, I don't care about any of that. And we in my old company actually took out like the degree requirements for all of the jobs in cybersecurity, and HR like every 3 months would like put them all back because they're like, well, obviously you want that in there, right? It's like, oh, you must have misspoke. It's like, no, we don't care. But for directors, you obviously want directors. It's like, no, don't care.
Well, yeah. And I hear often that, especially in larger organizations, that's a constant challenge, is the battle with internal red tape. And how do we get something that we know is needed or isn't needed on the job description or into the interview process? Because, some companies may have extensive interview processes, and the hiring manager may be aware that, hey, we're going to lose a lot of good people if we extend this past 3 rounds, but they can't get it approved. How are you able to get those exceptions made, I guess? Right.
Group. It's about showing, and it's about having the influence, having a relationship with the right people, helping to, like you said, articulate to them the why. Right. And this was like where Neurodiversity came in. And I, trained, one of the things that, all of the leadership and we're understood neurodiversity, and I did talks on it and for the cybersecurity team, the IT team, and in fact, the whole company. I mean, 3 dims over a 6-month period, kind of understand what it's like for people who are like ADHD and autistic. And the interview process is very stressful, and they will probably be very poor interviewers if they are not as verbal, and they may be very literal in how they answer the question. And they also would be very uncomfortable in very static questions and answers, where you have a particularly panel interview where everyone's asking the same question around robin, and you don't get to say anything about who you are and what you are. It's just like, tell me a time you did this thing, describe how you would do this thing, describe this thing. And they're like, okay, this, that. And it's like, you have no connection with the person. And again, I understand it's about scalability, repeatability, and objectability. In the large companies, we need to make sure that we are being objective and we can hold that we're not doing any bias or discrimination. So we are asking all the same questions and getting the answers and rating the answers. And you're going to miss out. And it's like, we're going to lose most of the neurodiverse people in that process. And so it's like, we're not going to be able to get good people if we keep doing that. And by articulating that to them, they say, okay, we'll give an exception as long as you show that there is objectivity and that you are not, discriminating against certain groups for whatever, because you really are in this process by, like I said, neurodiverse people who may be very uncomfortable in the interview process may not even apply. It's like, oh, well, you're going to go through 3 rounds of interviews and 2 things. The panel's like, no, I don't care. I'm fine. I won't even try, even though they may be terrific people. Because also, being perfectionist, you would also never advocate for yourself. You would never say that you're an expert in something, even though you really are. And so those kinds of things where because you always know you can be better, or someone who is better. And so as opposed to someone with a lot of confidence who's like, oh yeah, I'm an expert at this and that. And like, okay, then describe to me how you would do it. And then they can't describe it to me. Where the person who really is expert, they're like, well, I'm not really good at it. It's like, well, how would you do it? It's like, oh, I would do this and this and this and this and this. I'm like, sounds like you're an expert to me. Like, oh, no, I still got a lot to learn. Like, yeah, those are the people I want.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think, and I've talked about this before, I think a lot of hiring, when I work with a hiring manager and they say they want somebody with good communication skills, for instance, That's kind of code for saying we want somebody who's outgoing, who's really engaging, who's maybe type A, and is confident, like you said, and maybe just naturally an extrovert versus somebody who's an introvert or more analytical. When, depending on the role, that analytical person who's a little bit more quiet or quieter and answers in very succinct answers, they may be better for whatever job, depending on what the type of job is. So, I think there's often a lot of hiring for personality and not necessarily competence or potential competence.
Right. And then that goes back to context. And it was a very good example you said about someone just says, I want someone with good communication skills. Give me the context. Is it that because they're going to be briefing the customer? Is it because they're going to be socializing with the upper management? Is it they're going to be bringing teams together and need to be able to communicate and organize people and influence people to move in a direction? Because I can tell you that, Jessica, who can't look her in the eye and it's very specific in how she answers, is going to take a technical team and they're going to follow her into the fire because she's very, very competent in that. And even though she's not very eloquent in how she says it, they respect that she knows what she's talking about and can do that. So that kind of thing, depending on the why. So yeah, these are all the nuances, which I think we're kind of coming to. Just like talking to Gen AI, you need to be very specific and have context about what it is you're looking for and why you're looking for it if you want the good answer out of it.
Yeah, well, I find myself often advocating for people or pushing back on a client, for instance, who says somebody's not a fit, because I'll say, in my experience, in my world, this person is a really good fit, and here's why. And I'll explain those nuances. While they don't on paper have this is why I think this person's a good fit for this particular role in this context. But I think often recruiters don't necessarily do that pushback. And a lot of it is because we know who pays us,
Right.
and at the end of the day, the customer is always right, as they say. So
right.
How much can you push back?
But we want to get the best person. That's why I'm very engaged with my staffing community here in Charlotte and a lot of my friends and all the staffing firms, because I want to give them that context and I want them to help them with when they're getting people from my peers. It was like, these are the words you tell them that let them know, what you're talking about. And because the more good people and qualified people we get, the better it is for all of us in my industry. Because if you just keep, people who are shiny buttons that have all the right certifications and just read books and took tests and passed certifications, it was like, they're not going to be always asking the questions. It's like, I don't want someone who thinks they know all the answers. I want someone to keep asking questions. And so the more of those good people out there is going to make it better for all of us and the whole industry be more secure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's the end goal is we need the best people to make sure that we as an industry are secure.
Well, and I think I noticed the theme in a couple of your answers. Humility seems to keep coming up, where you don't want somebody who thinks that they're the smartest person in the world necessarily. How can you recognize humility in somebody?
Oh, yeah. A lot of times, just like in the answers that they have and how much credit they take for things and how much boasting they do about it. And I'm not saying that like, if a person really, really is good at something and they are arrogant, it's like, I'm fine with that. I know how to accommodate that and manage that and keep them in a little room and stuff. But if they're like really, really special, very rarely is that the case that they are like special enough to earn that. A lot of times it's a false, because they think they're good and they're not around. I mean, I want in my team, if you say who's the smartest one in the room, I want everyone to go like this. And even though they may be the person, right? And it's really about, because we need to be together. We are a support group that needs to lean on each other and trust each other to be able to go towards the goal of doing whatever it is, the mission we're doing at the time. And if there is any animosity about like, oh, don't give it to Jeff, he's just going to try to take all the credit for it, then like we have a process of failing because people are not going to do their best in that sense. And so creating a team, and it's a piece of personalities and it's like a culture. The team has its own personality. And if you bring somebody in who, you have a team of people who are all like quiet and whatever, and very humble, and you bring someone who's very outgoing and brazen and arrogant, then that's just going to disrupt everybody's productivity. And that's not good. But if you have a whole bunch of people like that, then they get competitive and it may be even better.
Yeah. So that makes me think, so how do you strike that balance then? You don't want a team that's completely homogenous necessarily, but you need people to be able to interact comfortably without and build trust, basically, like you had mentioned. Where's the line between being too disruptive and being just disruptive enough to have new ideas?
Yeah, I mean, the diversity of thought is a very important thing. Diversity of background is a very important thing. And then that everyone respects and understands that this is a meritocracy, right? And it's not, which is somewhat unique to certain, and particularly in different parts of the world that don't really associate with that, is which when I was a virtual CISO was very struggling when there was a hierarchical community in culture in a country. And it's like, no, we're a meritocracy, meaning that it's whoever is the person who knows the most about this topic. If it's a tier 1 SOC analyst, then we're listening to Joanna. It's like, if she understands this, then Joanna, you take the lead on this. We're like, but it doesn't matter. You're the smartest one on this topic because it's your special interest and you've done a lot of research about it. Tell me about that. Cool. You take the lead on that. And then, we're guiding and whatever. And that also gives opportunities for people to highlight their specialty, and everybody's unique specialties brought together make us all better. In going forward. And so it's like understanding. So the line is understanding what would mess up that ecosystem. Right. If you put some predatory animal in there that messes the ecosystem, then that may be bad. Or you put like more prey animals in that you don't have enough predators, whatever the analogy we want to use. But yeah, no, I'm not saying it's easy. But not that you're going to not make mistakes, but be able to correct easily. Correct quickly. I'm sorry. Not easily. It's never easy, but correct quickly is what I meant to say. Thank you. It's like correct it quickly. And it's like, okay, I'm going to set your side. It's like, okay, Jonathan, we need to have a talk about this. It's like, we are one team. We are this thing. Are you able to adapt to this and understand and hold back? And I know that you want to like this. I know you want to do this kind of stuff, but I need you to respect the team and have that stuff. And you can come tell me. I mean, there are things where people are really hot-headed and they go off their cuff on something. You're like, if you get upset, come into my office and yell at me, throw stuff, whatever. Just do it in here in a controlled environment, get it out of your system, and then go back and work with everybody. It's like, and let's like work on not doing that the next time. Just don't mess up the team, because one of the things about managing neurodiverse people is that, if they are uncomfortable, then they're not going to be productive. If they are asked to do things that are not anything that they they feel they're able to do or qualified to do, then they're going to be unproductive. And in leading up to it, if you say, hey, we want you to brief the customer, put a presentation together and do that, they're not going to do anything for 2 weeks. And then the night before, they're going to put this together and then it's going to get done and it'll be fine. But, why am I putting them through that when I have other people who are perfectly capable and enjoy doing that? And it's like, all right, we're going to keep Steve in a room. You go talk to Steve, get all the data out of it, put together a presentation and brief it. He can be fine in that room there. But then we also fight with leadership to say, hey, well, they should be more around. You should have them do these things. Like, nope, don't care. I need to protect them to make sure that they are focused, they're happy, and they're productive, because that's what's going to make them stay, is when they know that they're safe. It's like unsafe to them. And this is again a neurodiversity thing, is this is how you get people to leave, is that you're asking to do things that they don't feel comfortable doing. You're putting them in situations that are chaotic. You're not giving them stability. You don't feel like they have support. They don't feel like they're safe and be able to do the things or speak their ideas. And then they're going to like want to go. In the early 2000s, I've been through 4 acquisitions of companies when I was running ethical hacking teams. And every single one would say is, hey, is your folks going to stick around now they're in a big company? I'm like, as long as they're working on interesting work and they're busy and they are challenged, they're fine.
Yeah, well, and as long as you have a good team culture, even if, say, the overall corporate culture isn't great, you can still have a cohesive team.
Yeah, and that's my job, is do the air cover to protect for me the craziness up there. Absolutely.
Well, and one thing I struggle with is team culture and company culture, because there's so many things that get smuggled into the term culture. When a client of mine is hiring for culture fit, they'll say, not a culture fit. I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean?
That's a dangerous word to use in a big company too.
Yeah. So how do you define your own, I guess, team culture and ensure that you're not just hiring the same person over and over again in terms of culture fit?
Excellent point. Because I'm writing a book about leadership with my friend Carlos, and leadership of cybersecurity people, very specific niche that no one's really talking about. And that was one of the things I literally 2 nights ago was writing that up is because I was having a talk with somebody who said, yeah, I don't hate it when people just hire the people who are just like them. They all, someone who came out of a big systems integrator and they have the same job background, or they went to the same school, or they played sport like they did. And then you have this, everyone is kind of the same cookie cutter, and you don't have that diversity of thought, of background, of approach, of personality. And that's homogenizing it is bad. And so I always say that I want at least one person on the team that disagrees with everything I say, and not just to be the person to disagree, but honestly is a lot more pessimistic. I'm more optimistic. And they're like, oh, this is never going to work. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. It's going to work. We'll figure it out. And it's so yes. And recognizing that which a lot of people have a hard time, they recognize it because they say, oh, we have a diverse group. I'm like, yeah, but everyone came from, I'll just say Ivy League school, or which never would happen in cybersecurity. But everyone, played basketball or played sport collegiately, or everyone is from, Chicago or went to school in Chicago and something. You'll probably find some little niche and not complete diversity of everything. And that is a challenge, because then you're just going to all grow in one direction and not grow, in a broader direction. No, it's an excellent point. And it's recognizing and knowing that's there. So even if you just said, make sure you don't do this, people will identify. They just don't know that they're doing it.
Yeah, well, maybe it's helpful then to come up with a set of core values that maybe are unique to a specific team and define it that way.
That's a great idea. Yeah, it kind of says hey, I would want a team of people who like working in a meritocracy, that have diverse thought and support diverse thought, that have, active and courageous conversations with them to working towards the same goal, that, are able to, stretch into things they want to stretch to, but also have their own boundaries of what they won't do. Right. And that's an important aspect. And because I don't want it to be asking someone to do something that makes them uncomfortable. And certainly there are times that you have to, I'm like saying, generally I'm being the, what's it called? The friend parent or whatever, the thing of parenting where it's no, you're always right. I'm going to give you whatever you want. No, I mean, there's things we got to do, but if I have the ability to say, hey, can I not do this thing because it makes I'm not comfortable in doing this, or working in the team in this kind of stuff I'm not really good at, or hey, you want me to write a paper, I'm not really good at writing things like that. I'm like, no problem at all. I'll set you with someone who's a writer, and they'll interview you and they'll write it down. You can edit it, and we'll call it a day. I'm outcome based, right? And so yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, and that highlights the importance of having people with differing skills on a team where everybody doesn't necessarily have the same expertise. You're creating a well-rounded whole from people with individual narrow expertise. That idea had actually come up in previous episodes, kind of the Moneyball way of hiring, where the whole is greater for people with separate expertise, but you don't necessarily expect everybody to be a generalist or everybody to be an expert in everything, which security is a mile wide and a mile deep, so that's impossible anyway. But
right. Yeah. So people, I remember when I was hiring ethical hackers 3 years ago, I realized that everyone on the team had Unix backgrounds. And so I looked for someone who was a Windows admin, and it's all right, I need some Windows expertise because I have all this Unix expertise. I have Windows expertise, or someone who's really good application. We had a lot of network testers, but not application testers. So someone who was a developer background that wants to come into this. And so a lot of times cybersecurity is people transitioning. Those unique people that are missed are the ones transitioning into the industry from some other discipline.
Well, yeah, and we're obviously not hiring enough of those folks, or at least in my opinion, it's obvious. There's just not a lot of hiring happening for either one, career changers, or two, entry-level folks. And obviously some folks would say that security is not an entry-level field. You have to have a certain baseline level of technical knowledge to secure what what you need
Depends
to
on the
understand.
role. There's a rainbow of roles. So you can start in one that's not technical, that you can start in anything. And I also get that if you're in a mid-sized company and you have 3 security people, you can't have like a junior person. You need everyone to be, productive from day one to do the things and then maybe kind of get up. But so, yeah, I understand that there are circumstances where that is true.
Yeah, well, and I've long been an advocate for anybody that knows that they can get their money back on the entry level hires or the folks that they need to train. So MSSPs, consulting firms, anybody where that new hire is eventually going to be revenue generating, somebody that they need to train, they really, really need to be training the next generation of security professionals. But nowadays we're seeing AI as it's getting better, decreasing the number of those jobs. Is there any solution to that?
Yeah, that's a challenging one because staff displacement, because, I talk to a lot of cybersecurity startups, and there's a lot of categories around, tier 1 SOC automation, of vulnerability remediation, amount of management, prioritization, of attack surface management, of governance risk compliance, of third party risk, of risk analysis, all these things that I would be offloading to some junior person to do all this busy work and then come to me. And if that's getting offloaded to that, then where are we getting the pipeline of people? And, depending on who you talk to, it's like, all right, if we automate all the tier 1 SOC analysts, how do we find a tier 2 SOC analyst? Right. And so, some people on the pessimistic side, they would say, by the time we're ready for tier 2 SOC analysts, AI's got that too. And it's just going to work its way up the chain. I don't necessarily believe that, but it's certainly a possibility. And I think that, the thing I've always said about AI, and I do a lot of white papers about AI ethics models. I have a paper about neurodiversity and AI prompt engineering. And is that either you figure out how to be more efficient and effective in your job by leveraging AI, or someone's going to figure out how to use AI to replace you. So it's kind of like you have the agency in there and there's there's an old saying about senior people are usually less resistant to change. and so it's and they are at greater risk of trying to do things the way we've always done it, where junior people are more apt. And I also tell people nowadays, I'm like, everyone has the same amount of experience with AI, which is 0 years, right? So you come in and say, hey, I've done all this stuff, academically at home or whatever, these projects to do this thing. I have these ideas about how to do things. And congratulations, you have more experience than anyone else on the team already, right? So it's about your aptitude, your ability to proactively learn it and do things and finding solutions for it, that you can come to the table when you're talking to them, when you're interviewing, and saying, hey, yes, I have worked a lot with that. I've done prompt engineering. I understand context engineering. I've worked with predictive model, all these things. And this are some ideas I have about how you would automate that. And even if they're not ready to do it, you're like, hey, well, great, because we'll probably get to that point. We need someone who understands this.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen plenty of talking heads on LinkedIn basically, and in some cases explicitly say adapt or die. To me, that seems a little bit, cold. I tend to be of the opinion that I think there's always going to be a need for a human in the loop in most systems.
Absolutely.
The question is how many jobs are truly going to be automated away. And I guess I'm a little bit pessimistic about that, because I think in general, if some sort of automation or AI system is cheaper than a human, the executives will tend to want to go with the system and not the human. So I don't know if there's any way around that.
Well, and it also depends on, so we're looking at with AI assisted development, right? And depending on the studies, it could be, 30 or 40% more efficient developing AI assisted developers, not vibe coding, but AI assisted development in the team. That metric is only based on number of lines of code written. There's still a lot of retooling that needs to be done, a lot of context needs to be put into it. So, but we'll just give it 15 to 20% efficiency. So my team of 10 developers is now, 20% more efficient. Great. Now they can catch up. Why would I shoot myself in the foot and say, great, let me get rid of 2 of them? Because now I can go back to the underserved level that I have now. I want more efficiency and more productivity out of them. So I'm giving them tools to be more productive. I kind of liken it to when spreadsheets came out for the accounting world, where they literally had to do all the math for all the things, right? And calculate. I mean, luckily you had calculators, right? And then the spreadsheet, magically you change one number and it magically all fixes it. There were probably times where like, wow, we can now get more stuff done and get stuff off our plate. And over time, we may change business process to be able to do more things. Did we get rid of accountants? I don't know. I don't remember being I was not in the accounting field in the 70s to know if we lost a lot of accountants, but there's still a lot of accountants today, right? And they use spreadsheets every day and they're really good at it. And then maybe other jobs happen. I compare it to automotive, to bowling alley, automotive bowling alley pin things. It's like, these are things that are going away to automate things that humans do. The humans can go do something else that is created. Like, I need to maintain these bowling alley automatic pin things. I need to manage and the tooling for it. I need to, in cars, I went from being a farrier to now changing oil and replacing tires and all these kind of things. So I think there's going to be a displacement into other things. It's figuring out what those things are.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose too, it all depends on how good it actually gets, and you see lots of folks arguing about whether or not we'll actually ever get artificial general intelligence. And if so, I would say if that's possible and we do get that, then that's a completely different proposition, I think, than what we're seeing currently, where you do still need, the human to manage.
Right. And so my overall AI perspective on humans still need to be in loop because for two big reasons, very macro level reasons. One, AI needs humans to have original content to learn from, right? And otherwise it's just going to be self-perpetuating itself and it's going to steer off and drift into some very biased area. If it's creating novel things, it's creating novel things based on human research. And humans can wake up one day and have an original idea and do research and give you an idea. Now, AI could help with that, but it's not like an original thought. And so we need to have original content to continue to learn and train models, which it itself is, you can ask anyone who's doing an AI QA and AI checking AI is going to drift and become very biased. And the second thing is AI needs humans to validate that it's right. Because AI QAing itself, again, is like, yeah, this looks right, but the human's like, no, that's not right. And so those two very fundamental things are why we still need to be a loop, is they need to say, hey, this is what I came up with. Is this right? And an expert will say, no, that's not right. It looks good to 9% of the people who are not experts, but I'll tell you it's wrong because of these things. And so we're always need a human in a loop. I am not optimistic that AGI is a thing that is going to be realized at a time. And also we struggle with the definition of it, because it's like the things that we are using as a metric, whether it can pass the bar or stuff, is very static analysis. And I look at, Anthropic had their AI, their agent vending machine project that they did earlier in the year. And you think it's very simple to hey, figure out what products they sell, get the supply chain, get them in there. And it's absolutely failed miserably, in the greatest way, because they learned a lot from that exercise, but it's also just if you put an intern in to do that who had no business acumen whatsoever, you didn't give them the context, they're going to fail as well. And so it's what are the things, because humans are able to adapt and adjust as necessary, that I think we're going to have to I think we're going to probably redefine what everyone thinks AGI is over the years before. And I think when we get to a point where this is acceptable to do certain tasks, it still needs humans to validate that it's true, and it still needs humans to create content to train it. Yeah.
Well, I guess you could define it as when it's able to create without any sort of outside influence. And yeah, I don't know if it'll get to that point or not, but yeah, like you said, it's already passed the Turing test, so we're beyond that at this point. Yeah, we'll see where it goes, I guess. I guess what about security specifically? How do you see the field shaping up over the coming years as more and more of these systems are being implemented, and how do you think that's going to affect, I guess, the demand for certain skill sets?
Yeah, so my statement on AI is it's increasing the surface area. But as we did with web, as we did with applications, as we did with mobile, as we did with cloud, these are not new things. It's concepts that we've increased the surface area. And the things that we do from a security perspective to protect that are 90% all the same. There's some nuanced things about observability and interpretability and transparency and AI drift and certain things that that it's doing and it's talking about. That could be like new things, just like having employees that, I don't want to say go rogue because that's kind of strong, but that are doing things that are not expected, right? And that could be disruptive, and I'm not saying maliciously or anything like that. And so, but that's like insider threat. We already have an insider threat program now. We kind of apply it to these agents, these AI agents that are running around. So I think that there's opportunity for AI understanding and knowledge about being a wrangler of agentic AI agents, about understanding MCP, the model context protocol, way to manage the agents and talk to the LLM about distilling models and testing models and how to implement it and making sure that all of the things are when everybody implemented Copilot and they started doing testing, every single person realized that, oh no, all of my SharePoint permissions are off. I thought that I had permissions and I thought the finance folder was only limited to finance people, but somebody had it open to everybody and I can find sensitive well, I didn't find Copilot, has nothing but time in the world to check every single file and every single directory and go through that. I was like, oh, this is free. This is free. This is free. I can access this. I can access this. And so that's not an AI issue. That's a hygiene issue. And so that's the thing that I'm seeing in cybersecurity is that AI has not yet been the thing that's causing the problem. AI is identifying weaknesses that we had that AI can find because humans were not as persistent to be able to look for them.
Yeah, or just didn't have the bandwidth, and
Sure.
AI thinks pretty quickly. So it's a great point. So I would think that moving forward, if you're hiring somebody, you're looking for somebody that's tinkering. I mean, that's always kind of been the case in security, but especially now with AI, you have to be constantly learning. You're looking for somebody who's adaptable. So, newest attack comes out, they need to be able to pick up on that quickly and adapt how they're operating. Any other traits you would look for? I guess agnostic of what the role is or personality-wise.
I would say dedicated to the mission, hey, I understand our job is to protect the organization and do the things we need to do. And there's nothing outside of the scope of that, right? Nothing is outside the scope of that. Where people are like, oh no, I'm a DBA. I don't do anything else. Like, well, you're going to need to do this too. That people are able to to be interested in learning new things and go into broadening where they're now. Also, another kind of like hidden thing is people who are they're on the ladder that are trying to get this position to get to this position. I want people who are happy to be where they are until they're not. But if someone's coming in and they immediately are like, great, I'm trying to jockey for this role over here, then you're not focusing on the job I need you to do. You're focusing on positioning yourself to get into this other job, into some higher thing or whatever it might be. And so one of the things I really was happy in my career, like everyone was just happy where they were. And like literally I have ethical hackers that I worked with 25 years ago that are my age that are still doing the same job they did 25 years ago. They're still working for a consulting firm, doing ethical hacking, doing their thing, and they love it, and good for them. Other people want to go. I took other career paths. Other people went into startups. Other people, went into IT. Other people just went out of the industry and did something completely different, and that's all perfectly fine. But like, if you were there, it's like, great, I'm interested in doing the thing that you're having me do, and I want to learn everything about it. And then maybe over time, when it's like, all right, I've solved this. I mean, neurodiverse people, it's an interest-based nervous system. What motivates us is not because it's important or there's a punishment or a reward. It's something that's a special interest to it. It's novel, it's a challenge, or it's urgent, right? And so it's like, hey, this is fun, and then it's no longer novel. And then it's like, okay, well, now it's, but I'm still really interested in it, and I'm going to do it. But then I lose interest, and then like, okay, well, now I need to, like having a border collie, right? You got to give it constant enrichment of some sort or else it's going to cause trouble. And so but it's again, me understanding that and seeing that it's like, hey, let me get you in these other things to give you more novel things to work out or more challenging things to work at.
Yeah. Well, and some of what you'd mentioned there leads me to how I prefer to recruit people, which is into stretch roles. because if you're hiring somebody into a stretch role, they're automatically happy about that step up. If you're hiring somebody into a direct lateral move in every single way, then yeah, chances are they are angling for that next position or that next great thing. But if you're hiring somebody into a stretch role, you automatically have some runway there, I feel like, because most people don't expect to change jobs or get promoted every 6 months. Maybe that's changing a little bit with the generations, but yeah, I think you'll have more longevity in somebody if you're hiring them into a stretch role, and they'll be more excited about that role to accept it.
Is given the opportunity to do it, and they'll want to kind of step up, and they'll understand the responsibility to it. Yeah, and sometimes it's like you want to be part of a team. It's like, I'll take any, like me right now, like if there's group, I'll be happy to take any role. Like if it's a really great team that's doing some great thing and a company that's doing some amazing good for the world, then I'm like, yeah, I'll go hang with you folks. I mean, personally, even though I said what I said, personally, every single job I've taken in the last 20 years, I started in one role and then created a role that did not exist. That was based on my abilities, because as you tell people all the time, I'm sure, it's like you get hired as a specialist, but being a generalist is what expands you in the role.
Yeah, well, or what gets you promoted. So you're more cross-functional, you can lead cross-functional teams, that sort of thing. And you see that often when somebody gets promoted all the way up to CISO, is they start getting different functional areas underneath them. Because if they were just a GRC person their whole career, chances are they're not going to be well-rounded enough to move into that leadership role and have a breadth of experience necessary to manage all those different teams and command the respect of all those different teams.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, and that's a big thing with technical people, is respecting the leadership, that they understand they don't have to be doing it, and they may not have come up, but they understand, they respect what it takes to do what it is. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, we're coming up on time already, Rick. So just one last question for you.
That goes fast. Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
Employment fraud. In big companies, that there's a lot of people who are overemployed, either consultants or regular employees who, because they're working remote and they may not be in a stretch role, and they're kind of like, hey, this is pretty easy for me, I'm going to also get a job somewhere else. And identifying that, and where it may not be an issue with some companies, and but if you're in a regulated company, or your data is sensitive and shouldn't be, that people are dedicated to a certain thing, and then there's also the people outsourcing it to overseas. That becomes more important in regulated companies, and the data is supposed to be only in the US, and it's being used by someone in another country that's doing the development, or it's being accessed by someone who is not read in or signed off on privacy notice and stuff like that. That can be an issue. So not just like the standard stuff you deal with, which is the right person who I interviewed showing up for the job, that I interviewed, but when the people have the job, are they outsourcing it to somebody else, or are they working multiple jobs? Just here in Charlotte, one of my friends at a bank called me a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, I think I have someone who's working for this bank and then another manufacturing firm in town. Can you connect me with their CISO? And I said, yeah. And they're like, yep, they're working for us too. And then they, 3 days later, fire them from all 3 jobs at the same time,
Wow.
because that was not disclosed. And so it may be something in the larger companies that's more common. I'm biased, working with lots of large companies and being part of them and all. And, because I know that I have friends of mine who are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never seen that. I'm like, well, you may not be looking for it. And so some ways to look for it for all of you out there is, you probably blocked remote access to your laptops, as you should if you haven't. But remote desktop on Zoom or remote desktop on Teams is a good way of identifying if somebody is like, hey, why are they remote desktoping for that? That should not be done. And then the classic, impossible travel, logins, VPNs from a VPN. So if you have a corporate VPN and it's coming, obviously they'd be smart enough not to come from, the Philippines or something. It's like, why does someone come from the Philippines? They'd probably VPN through NordVPN or some standard commercial VPN, but we all know, all the tooling knows the concentrators for all those VPNs. So it's like, hey, how come you're coming, from a Ninja VPN concentrator in New York on our VPN, corporate VPN? It's like, why would you VPN to a VPN? Maybe need to check for that. It could be benign. It could be that, you have it part of when you bought your antivirus package, it comes with a VPN and it automatically turns you on every time. And maybe that's fine, but something to look into.
Yeah, it's like an alert that a human might want to look into. Yeah, well, great point. If people want to reach out to you, Rick, what's the best way to do so?
Over LinkedIn, I'm easy enough to find on that. I also have a YouTube channel where I do a bunch of cybersecurity videos. I'm on the editorial panel for the CIS critical security controls. And when version 8 came out 4 years ago, I did a video for all the 18 critical security controls and what changed between 7 and 8, why we changed it, and all this stuff, because I felt really bad that we used to be the 20 critical security controls and we got rid of 3 and added 1. And having been a virtual CISO and knowing that some of my customers spent years getting their program aligned to the controls and then we changed it on them, I wanted to make sure that here was all the stuff to be able to map it. And then some other videos I've done that, I posted up there. I need to do more, but
we'll put that link as well in the description.
Sure.
So appreciate your time, Rick. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.